So our level sill spillway. So it's all about when we overflow water, we can take a lot of the energy out of it, we can spread it out. So if we spread it out level and let it overflow, it's gonna just be a micro little channel that we have to deal with. If we keep it narrow, then there's a lot of energy in that. So that's the best way of letting a large amount of water either enter the pond or leave the pond. So this is our emergency spillway. And it's basically just an earthen spillway that's got an indention in it, 16 foot wide here, and water can just come over. This just has to be super compacted. If water comes over it, this will be the place where it'll take clay. If it gets one hole in it, the water will start to channel down that hole, and it'll just go straight down, and then all the water in your pond will come out. This is a piece of our diversion box. This is when it rained a couple weeks ago, and you see this illustrates that level spillway effect. See, we're spreading out the water and it's falling down, and that takes a lot of the energy out of the force. Fish are incredibly important for what we're doing. We're collecting water primarily on the farm to irrigate with. We want to think about how we can stack as many features into that as possible. Fish are incredible because it's the fastest protein that we can grow, really. Because they don't support their own body weight, we can raise them up a lot faster. And then we get the nutrients from them in the water, and we can do, okay, so this is, I just showed you where the water was spilling over. That's in this section. This is the plan for our diversion box. This is looking down at it. This is a cross section of it. So basically I have the water coming in from the biochar plant in the greenhouse, and I've got it coming in from the hill above right here. It's coming into this area, which there's a catch basin, and that's a sediment catch basin. So anytime you can put a catch basin or a small pond to collect the sediment before it goes into your big pond, the better off you're going to be. It'll keep the sediment out of your larger ponds. And then the water's coming across and then it's spilling over. We built a fish lock into it. I'm still fabricating the gate for it, but basically it's a deep spot right here that we'll be able to feed the fish in the pond. They'll come over, we'll be able to train them into this area. We'll put a gate down and we can harvest them really easy. It's also, there's a little waterfall with filter beds here that water will circulate through the system, so it'll be pumped into here and it'll fall down, it'll fall into this catch basin, flow over and into here, so we have a constant stream of oxygenated water. Because what's super easy to happen, especially summer, is fish die off. You get nutrients in the pond, you get algae, you get not a lot of oxygen when it's hot. Yes?
Do you have a particular variety of fish that you feel like is more appropriate for this setting?
That's a really good question. I kind of like this bottom pond. I see it more of I don't want to say standard farm pond, but we're going to be feeding them some, but it's not necessarily a high-end aquaculture kind of scenario. It's more that we want to develop a steady relationship between several species of fish, that they can kind of establish their populations and feed themselves from either what we throw in there, the insects that come in there, the frogs. I mean, it's amazing. Or they're eating themselves basically.
So you don't have a particular variety?
Well, here, we don't have any fish in here yet, but I'd like to do a carp or two to keep the grass down possibly. You got to be careful with that because they will breed and you'll get so many in there that it'll really take away, but you can do a sterilized carp. You can do bass, you can do brim, and I love catfish. Catfish, you slip them in there and they just disappear to the bottom, and they'll eat anything. They're like super recyclers. They'll just go at it. So we've stacked that function of bringing the water in safely, of having a spot to collect, harvest fish, of aerating the water for the fish. And the other function this does is when the water gets all the way up to the top in the pond, so imagine the pond's full, water's coming in, this actually is a diversion box. It'll fill up so much that the water has to back flood. And it back floods out and heads down this way. So the pond can no longer accept water in it. So it's a super safe feature that keeps you from, it basically keeps it from going over the emergency spillway because it just back floods out of there.
What'd you call that again? Overflow?
This is a diversion box.
But the where it backflows over.
The back flooding is just a little canal. Yep. It's, you really want to think about, you don't want to just artificially try to stack different functions in the system, but you really want to think about how many systems you can stack. You know, you can just keep going with it. The more, the better. You get more out of it, you know. This, we put rock work, and it's pretty, so we have beauty in there, which is important, you know. Water plants, you know, they're pitcher plants. Water plants are amazing. They clean the water. You know, fish can eat them. Lily pads, frogs can hop on them. A lot of water plants can oxygenate the water and filter the water. So that's something you want to think about. And then there's edible and useful water plants. And you want to be careful here. You want to do this, I mean, I'm just trying to throw you out all the information, but you want to be careful because you can actually clog your pond up with duckweed and water lettuce and stuff like that. It can take over. But the awesome thing is duckweed will grow, it'll reproduce in 2 weeks. It'll double in size. It's high in nutrients. You can feed, it's great feed stock. You can't kill it. It's super easy. There's a lot of other useful plants you can put in water.
So would you be harvesting that off, like any excess to use for other?
Yeah, well, that's what I would be thinking about it. Yep, using it for feedstock, using it for chickens, quail love it. It can be composted, you know. So it's just kind of like a little extra thing in the system. It's tricky to grow duckweed because it doesn't like flow, it doesn't like movement. But if you have a part of a pond or certain little shallow ponds, you can put it in there and have it and just harvest. Yes?
Quick question about just the ponds and stuff. What if you already have an existing small wetland area? How would you continue to cultivate a pond there if it's already sort of gathering water without going through getting an excavator in there and compacting and everything like that? Is that even possible, or is it just that's the natural way the wetland is not holding on to a whole lot but still staying moist?
Say the last part again.
Is that just the natural way of the wetland, not necessarily gathering so much like a pond necessarily, or it's just I don't know, I guess that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, no, wetlands are amazing. They have the most diversity, and they're the most, I think, underappreciated and underutilized. You know, it's an awesome energy sink.
So it's possible to divert water to a wetland area to create, to basically create a pond over there. Is that possible?
Yeah, you can. You can dig it out, and yeah, that's besides the spring, that's another super sensitive area. Yeah, yep. So you got to be very careful.
I was thinking of like a very small, very specific area.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. Growing algae. If you look down in this pond, it's full of algae. Algae is like the future of food. It really is. Now they're making fertilizer, food, biofuel. And the cool thing about algae is it's a nitrogen fixer. So you see these algae blooms, what it's actually doing is it's harvesting the excess nutrients in the water and it's stabilizing it. So it's fixing the nitrogen in itself, taking it out of the water, and then it can be harvested very easily and then used. There's all kinds of pharmaceutical products that are made out of algae, and like the future is wide open with algae because it's so fast growing. Like people are just starting to use it, but it's an ancient form of agriculture to use algae. Like when I started the Anasazi, that's how they irrigated everything, or that's how they fertilized everything.
So the main source of protein for the ones in Mexico.
Yeah, protein. So high in protein and iron and potassium, and I mean, it's amazing. It's just, it's like the wetlands. It's misunderstood. So we can, all this is basically so we can irrigate our cropland, the ponds and the water collection. I mean, we want to think about irrigation, and we want to think about kind of the old school way of irrigating. Now it works really well to use pinpoint irrigation. Drip lines work beautifully, but there's some debate because no culture has ever survived very long on drip irrigation. What drip irrigation does is potentially you get a lot of salts concentrated in the upper crust of your soils, which you can flush that, and it may not be a problem. In certain areas, it's a super problem though. And they've had lots of problems with irrigating with groundwater, and the evaporation concentrates the salts in the surface. So what I like to think about is getting back to kind of the more ancient way of irrigating, and that's flood irrigation. And that's flooding an area, probably in your paths or furrows. You don't do it too often. It depends on what you're growing and depends on the season. But flood irrigating, you can flood irrigate once, and that's a slow soak in the soil. And what that does is it soaks in slowly and stays in the soil. Where drip, is really nice because that's pinpointing right on your plants, but your plant roots are encouraged to stay closer to the surface. With flood, your plant roots are encouraged to go deeper and to get nutrients deeper. With flood irrigation, you can use the dirtiest, dankest, nastiest water, high in nutrients, and you can put it out, and it's really nice. I mean, there's more to it. It's very simple. I mean, we all did it when we were kids, like draw out a little area and then water it, But so I'd like to see us use more flood irrigation around here. Here, I'm doing a little flood irrigation. Water pumping, some of the windmill installation, but we have the windmill at the other farm to pump with. We're going to install a DC solar pump to pump with. You want to think about alternative energies when you can. The windmill's kind of pricey, but there's definitely lots of ways to pump water that are not so energy, we don't have to spend so much energy to pump. So can you hit the play button? Thank you. There's sound with this, but that's okay. It's just music. So basically, check it out. This is our windmill. This is an old-timey kind of style windmill. It's a 47-foot tower. We built the tower first, and then the mill on top, you have to assemble it. They've been making these for like 150 years. You can get 50 years of service out of one. And they pump pretty decently. Like this one has a 4-inch pump in it, and it can pump up to 600 gallons an hour. But it's not on demand, obviously. It's only when the wind's blowing. So that's why we had to kind of think about it a little bit differently and put the battery storage on top, the water storage on top, so we can pump over a long season and pump it up to the top, and then we could gravity feed down when we need it. So we got a crane, we dug holes, we set the tower in one piece, poured concrete around it. Pretty good basic stuff. You just want to anchor the windmill down. I think it's got like 5-foot legs, so you're anchoring it way down in the ground. And we had a fun time that day. It was super windy, and I cut out most of that because it was tricky. We had to jettison the one day because it got too windy, and then we were trying to get it up, and it just was kind of funky the way we were doing it. But the second time it worked out. Got the crane, raised the top. It slides down on the mast. This is a newer, they've been making them for 150 years. Like I said, this is a newer version, but it's heavy duty. It's still made in America. And we just, we don't see them out here. This is a little video I made, but I stuck it in here so some of it doesn't kind of pertain to it. But that's it without its pumping rod, so it's just flowing free right now and lots of energy there. We built this basin in the bottom, and we have a pump inside here underneath the windmill. And so this just goes so simple, up and down, up and down. It's each stroke, up or down, it's pumping water. And we've got a 20-foot deep basin under here. So basically, what we're doing is there's 2 pipes that go into the bottom pond that flow over into that basin to fill it. And the pump is sitting in that basin, and the water level in that basin is just the water level that's in the pond. The water level in the pond goes down, the basin level goes down. It rises. The pump's in the bottom of that. So it's kind of just like this little loop that works into there.
How do you deal with silt buildup?
And what part? There's lots of silt in different sections, but
To and from, from the pond to the basin.
well, there's a filter on the bottom of the pump. And then right now we've got the intake pretty low, but it's still about 1 foot higher than the bottom of the pond. The intake is, say, here, but the pond level is here. So most of the silt is falling lower in the pond. And then by the time it gets into the basin, there's a filter on the foot valve of the windmill. But eventually I want to put a floating screen, basically. And it just floats with the top of the level, and it's taking water off the top of the pond so there's less silt.
And would you clean that out? You would need to.
The filter, yeah, yep. I don't expect there would be a whole lot in it at the top, but there'll be some maintenance.
Is there a way to pump silt? If you wanted to de-silt a pond?
Yeah, we'll check it out. There's a filter that goes into the greenhouse. We've got a spin filter, which takes out most of it. And then that goes into a sand filter, which there's muddy water going in. And you open the valve on that sand filter, and it's just clean water coming out. It's amazing. Yeah.